Hi, I'm Ai-Lin. Today we're going to learn about how to listen for note-taking. We're going to look at how to prepare to listen to a lecture or a talk, and things you need to think about while you're listening. Before we listen, we need to try and prepare, which really means we need to predict a lot of things. You might need to attend a lecture or listen to a talk. You might be watching a TV show or listening to the radio. These are some examples of listening activities in your daily life. Before you go to a lecture or a talk, it's always wise to look at the topic and to prepare for it. You can do so by reading about the topic to familiarize yourself with the possible vocabulary and the main points that might be covered. For example, most courses at university will provide students with reading lists, and some lecturers will give you assigned reading before each lecture. The next thing would be to look at previous lectures on the same subject. If you know there's a series of 10 lectures, before you go to lecture number 5, read up on the previous lectures to see if there's some kind of continuation so that you can predict what the next area would be on the same topic. Then you need to think about the vocabulary and grammar that was used in the previous lectures or that you encountered in the reading. This activates your memory and activates all that vocabulary that you learned the weeks before. And when you hear them again, it'll just come to mind straight away. And finally, you need to take notes as you listen. As you will need to write many notes continuously, it would help if you had some abbreviations for big words or words that are used frequently. We call this shorthand. Now, before you go to a lecture or a talk, you need to ask yourself, what's the purpose of listening to this lecture or talk? It's impossible to write every word you hear in a lecture or a talk, so you will need to pick and choose the words to write down, which will allow you to make sense of your notes after the lecture. Generally, every lecture has a structure so that the lecturer can take you logically from one idea to another, give you examples, and explain things before they take you to a different point. If you know there's a structure for a lecture or a talk, it will help you in taking notes. Lecturers often use slides with pictures and dot points of what the lecture is going to cover. As soon as you see these cues from a lecturer, you need to write down these main points so that you know when they're going from one to another. When speakers divide their talks into parts, they will introduce those parts using particular words. You also need to consider how the information in that lecture will be organized. Is it pros, cons, problem, solution, review of information, A versus B, or a process with a result? Here are some things to take note of when you're listening to something. At the beginning and end of a lecture or talk, the speaker will usually go over the main points of the talk, so make sure you listen carefully to ensure you have written these points down in your notes. One thing you can do is divide your page into different columns or sections to make it easier for note-taking. Speakers will use signpost words throughout their lecture to indicate where they are up to in their lecture. I have a list of commonly used signposting language here. For instance, first, let's look at indicates the first point that the speaker is addressing. For example, and such as, indicate examples used. It's a good idea to infer meaning from expressions of the speaker. To infer means to guess. For example, in a lecture that points out pros and cons of an issue, hearing words such as unfortunately, terrible, disastrously, talks about the cons the speaker is referring to. On the other hand, words like luckily, amazingly, advantage would indicate the pros of that issue. You don't have to write those words down, but it gives you a sense of which part of the argument they're talking about. Within a topic, points made by the speaker are often related. It's important to capture the relationship between points made in a lecture or talk. When you're going to a part of a lecture where they're talking about a cause and effect, you need to know words like leads to, caused by, results in, reduction in. These words are very useful because they're used again and again in lectures to talk about statistics and graphs and to explain facts to students. Finally, often in a lecture, lecturers will give you something to take away or to think about to finish up their lectures so that they can highlight what you should be looking into or researching or remembering from what they say. They will either repeat a point using different ideas or different sentences. And when you notice this, be sure to write that down because every lecturer will want their audience to have a takeaway from their talk. Now it's your turn. Are you ready to practice your listening and note-taking? Find a short clip to listen to that you come across in your daily life. Before you listen, predict what you think it might be about. Look at the topic and think about what it's going to tell you. Have you listened to anything else on a similar topic? What sort of vocabulary and grammar did you come across when you did that? What is your purpose of listening to this clip? What are you going to learn from this, and what should you be writing down? While listening, remember the steps we went through. Identify the main points. Look out for signposting language. Infer meaning from expressions. Look at the relationship between points. And take note of repeated points. If you choose to listen to a video clip, notice the visuals used. How did you go? Okay, so here's what you can do to practice. If there are points that you didn't write enough notes about, ask a classmate or your tutor and fill in the gaps. If there are words which you hear repeatedly or which you see in a visual that seem unfamiliar, write them down and be sure to look them up later. Increasing your vocabulary on this topic will help you understand it. Many lectures and talks are recorded, which gives you the advantage of being able to listen again to complete your notes. And as you become more confident in your note-taking skills, you won't need to listen the second time. Practice listening by watching news, documentaries, TV shows, and movies. And listen to the radio. It's also a good idea to engage in conversations with friends, neighbors, classmates, and work colleagues. Thanks for listening and learning with me today. I hope you had fun. Bye.